I'm Colin O'Keefe, and this is LXBN TV. Thanks to the Senate Judiciary Committee, the United States is one step closer to finally having a federal shield law to protect journalists and their sources. Joining me now to discuss is someone we've had on this program several times, attorney Kevin Goldberg of Fletcher, Heald and Hildreth, and author on the superb Com Law blog. Kevin, first, let's look at the positives here. What does this bill do, or what would it do? Is it really the federal shield law that we've all been waiting and hoping for?
I don't think it's any sort of federal shield law that we were looking for when we set out on this process 10 years ago. But I think it's a federal shield law that will help journalists that are able to take advantage of it. What you have to understand is there are about 40 states right now that have shield laws on their books, legislatively created laws that protect a reporter in certain situations. They all vary in any number of ways. All but one of the other states also have, or all but one of the other states has a judicially created privilege that also creates a reporter's privilege. Nothing exists at the federal level, and here's the problem. When a reporter sets out to follow a story, to investigate a story, to gather news, he or she doesn't know where the case is going to end up, if it ends up as a case at all. And so the lack of a federal protection creates this big loophole right now to any protection that the state shield laws might offer. So really, in some sense, anything is better because in the past decade, federal courts have not looked kindly on giving a First Amendment-based privilege to reporters. So what the law will do first and foremost is give some protection and give some certainty to reporters. How will it do that? Well, anybody who is defined as a covered journalist, and that's sort of a quasi-status-based, quasi-function-based test where you are doing things that a reporter might do for a certain type of media, which is actually drafted pretty broadly. And you are not someone who is affiliated with the terrorist organization or solely exists to be sort of a document dump a la WikiLeaks. Not to say WikiLeaks wouldn't ever qualify as a journalist, but if all they were doing in a certain situation were existing to take documents and dump them right back out without the usual analysis and writing and editing for publication, then they might not get the privilege. So if you are, covered in one of these media and doing what a journalist does, you can take advantage of the privilege. Now, what does that get you? It gets you a qualified privilege that varies according to the type of case that the court is looking at. In criminal cases, for instance, the government has to show by clear and convincing evidence that they're looking for information relating to a crime, that the information is essential to the determination of guilt and innocence, and that all other sources have been exhausted. And in addition, a reporter in his or her own defense could show by clear and convincing evidence that there's a public interest benefit to the privilege that outweighs the need for the information. In civil cases, it's slightly different. It's clear and convincing evidence that the court is looking for information via the testimony of the reporter that is essential to resolution of the matter, and again, that all sources have been exhausted, and again, the reporter has this sort of public interest balancing test. We also have two tests that apply where national security is involved, which require that the government show now by a lower standard, a preponderance of the evidence, that it needs the information because it would materially assist in preventing an act of terrorism or other acts that have caused or are reasonably likely to cause significant and articulable harm to national security. And finally, there's a slightly different test even where the matter at hand is simply the leak of classified information, which is probably the most prevalent situation of all that people think about lately when talking about a federal shield law. There are also provisions that will protect the Associated Press and others who, they're the most recent example, who have had their communication records, telephone or email records, subpoenaed from the third-party provider.
I see. So second, put on your prediction cap here. You are, of course, the Swami on the Com Law blog. Does this bill stand a chance of making it all the way through? Are we going to see this eventually become law?
Well, it's interesting. You called me the Swami, the Supreme Court Swami, having never argued a case before the court, having filed amicus briefs and been involved and an avid court watcher. But I do a lot of legislative work, especially representing one of my clients, the American Society of News Editors, who has been involved in this issue for, as long as I've represented them, which is now 18 years. And I will say, I think this is the best situation we've had to moving this bill forward. A separate bill had passed the House of Representatives twice. the second time by unanimous vote. The Senate has gotten a bill once through the Senate Judiciary Committee, but it was pretty clear that bill was not going to get a floor vote. There were too many unresolved issues that would have led to too much need for debate without the clear possibility of filibuster, so leadership at the time wasn't willing to commit floor time to getting it done. Now, however, we have a bill that's gotten through the hardest, first step, the Senate Judiciary Committee. It did it with a 13-5 margin. It did it after bringing in two very key senators into the fold. Senators Dianne Feinstein from California and Richard Durbin from Illinois worked out a deal with Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, who's the original sponsor of the bill, on a definition of a journalist that they could all live with. I think the fact that it's through earlier in the congressional calendar, the fact that we now have these two very key senators on board and seem to have resolved all of the issues that had previously potentially held this up, means it should get to the floor rather quickly, and we're very hopeful for that. So I think it's got as good a chance as possible. The next issue will be, though, whether the House decides it wants to continue on its own bill, which we know would pass based on prior history, or should pass based on prior history, or whether they are willing to take what the Senate passes and move it itself. That's the second really key issue. So first, can it get through a Senate vote quickly? And second, what will the House do?
I see. It's going to be fascinating to watch. I know I personally hope to have you on LXBN TV again in the future to discuss when this does eventually become law. Legislation, of course, is never perfect, but it would be really nice to see something done with this issue. Once again, that was Kevin Goldberg of Fletcher, Heald & Hildreth for more of his commentary on a federal shield law and other issues in the communications and media space. Be sure to visit comlawblog.com. And of course, if you're not already watching us here on LXBN, swing by lxbn.com, where you can find hundreds of these LXBN TV video interviews and curated commentary from our community of more than 8,000 members. Thank you for joining me today, Kevin.
Thank you.